Good afternoon, everybody. සුබ සන්ධ්‍යාවක් සියලු දෙනාටම. අද 28 වෙනිදා අපි අපේ සාකච්ඡාව පටන් ගන්න හදන්නේ. ඉතාලම වැදගත් ටොපික් එකක් තමයි අපි කතා කරන්නේ alternative proposals to revive the alternative proposals කියන්නේ IMF එකට දීලා තියෙන proposals වලට තව ඊට වඩා හොඳ දේවල් හරි ඊට වඩා ගැළපෙන දේවල් proposals ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න පුළුවන්ද ඒක ඇතුල් කරන්නේ කොහොමද කියන එක ගැන තමයි පොඩ්ඩක් අද කතා කරන්නේ. ඒකට ඇත්තටම why how and what කියන එක තමයි focus වෙන්න ඕනේ. මම හිතන්නේ අපේ දේශකයා ඒ ගැන කතා කරයි කියලා හිතනවා අද. So basically background එක පොඩ්ඩක් කිව්වනම් හොඳයි. හැමෝටම තේරෙනවා මේක පොඩ්ඩක් තේරුම් ගන්නත් ඕනේ. අපේ මේ ගෙදරක් ගමුකෝ ගෙදරක් තියෙන household ඉතින් පොඩි family එකක් ඉන්නවා. So they have been wastage of money for a long time and very poor planning and unnecessary luxury parties, various things, and have ended up with negative balance in their pockets. So they've taken loans and loans, which are soft loans. Soft loans means not much of a responsibility, higher interest rates, but when you get a loan, you might even get a perks kind of thing. And I think ඊට පස්සේ මෙහෙම loans අරගෙන ඉස්සරහට යනකොට so the breadwinner became really debt-ridden. So when he's debt-ridden, he get a poor credit rating and there are no more loans. So he can't now survive on this pathway of getting loans and surviving. And now serious situation has started because the family is in real hardship and there are family issues and so on that cannot be sorted. So the IMF, shall we say, is a lender who is quite strict but gave a loan. And it is of low interest and I've added lots of conditions and it's hard, some of these conditions. But it's estimated that the recovery from this current situation and the repayable of the existing loans is possible according to this plan. But the problem is whether with all these hardships, whether it will kill the family. That's basically the model that we have to think when it takes Sri Lanka. So household in that case is our public money in Sri Lanka and the breadwinner is the government. So it's this kind of model. I'm sure our speaker will talk about. Is there an alternative? Now in Sri Lanka, when you propose an alternative to repay and recover, any alternative, I've experienced this so many times working in Sri Lanka. Some are supportive, but it's a smaller number originally. More are negative, generally say no. In Sri Lanka, ලංකාවේ මොනම දෙයක් ප්‍රොපෝස් කරත් ඉස්සෙල්ලාම නෙගටිව් එක බෑ කියන කතාව තමයි එන්නේ. So anyway, so some are very critical of it. That is true. And some are still sleep the way through. They don't even know what the hell is going on. They just sleep the way through. They don't contribute in any way. And then we have the others as well who will grab you from the neck and become very aggressive. So I've made proposals and I've had this last situation many times in Sri Lanka. So it's nothing new to me, but that is the kind of environment we have. So, but what we want today is to be constructive. So whatever the proposal is there, try to be constructive, try to avoid unconstructively look at it, or please be not destructive also, because that is the only way we can have better opinions and better proposals, and that's what we apply in research and everything else to do. So presenter today is actually Danusha Gihan Pathirana. He represents a collective of trade unions and mass organizations. That's what he's written to me saying. He's in the audience at the moment. And welcome, Danusha. I have actually made you a co-host if you're presenting with slides. So he's a co-author of a book named The History of Underdevelopment and Political Economy of Inflation in Sri Lanka and published in Singapore. So he understands the history by this. And he's recently presented a paper on Sri Lanka's economic collapse at the 4th International Research Symposium on Social Sciences and Humanities, organized by the National Center for Advanced Studies. So he studied the Sri Lanka's economic collapse in its sense as well. And he holds a master's in economics from the University of Colombo, Sri Lanka, which is good. So he understands the basics of economy. and how it works. And plus, he's working for a PhD on the same subject. So he's exploring new things and new ideas and new evidence and everything. So it's a good combination for himself as well as for others to try to see what we can achieve. So the alternative proposal that he sent originally was circulated, and there was a second one that was on WhatsApp, which I've downloaded and copied this morning as well for you to have a look at. But based on the original proposal that I circulated, I got some comments, and I'm presenting these anonymously. Just keep that in mind, and occasionally I put a little bit of evidence also to or for this comment. So I am all for discussing and debating alternatives to my line of thinking, but what has been expounded in the document is totally insane. It is so obvious. We should keep the extremist out of the fringes. That's one negative comment, which we get normally. Then there was another comment saying apartments are owned by individuals and not corporates. So the forced sale of them is expropriation by force. In such light, will any foreigner wish to invest in Sri Lanka? This is JVP 1971 literature. So now, if you look at this situation where the corruption perception index for Asian countries, now higher the level, lesser the corruption. That's what it is. So Sri Lanka is now, look at that. Sri Lanka corruption level was at 40. This has now gone down to 30s. And India is like 40. Singapore is like in near 90s. So you can see corruption is minimal here in Singapore, and ours have worsened over the last 10 years. So in this kind of corruption situation, selling any government or politics or others is not going to be that clear or beneficial. So the IMF doesn't realize or pretending that by taxing the professionals and middle income groups beyond limit, they are creating a huge economic burden on the massive population sector, which depends heavily on these professionals and small enterprises, businesses for their daily living. That's why 14 lakhs of children are under malnutrition also. Now, this is a little bit of data sheet I will show you. 92% or 9 out of 10 business establishment in Sri Lanka is a micro enterprise, which we need to think about. Now, 27% or 3 out of 10 people employed in Sri Lanka by a micro enterprise. So 1/3 of the population employed by a micro enterprise. 73% of micro enterprises are facing a moderate to severe high risk of employment due to difficulties caused by post-COVID-19. And the SME sector, that's this micro enterprise sector, makes up 52% of the GDP in Sri Lanka. So it's a very big output that they're contributing. So know those facts when you are thinking about this. Then there's another comment saying these outlandish proposals will take the country and its people back into Stone Age, a la North Korea and Cuba. Some of the solutions proposed have been practiced since independence and contributed to the current economic crisis. Then somebody summarized everything. See, here is the essence of what this long article says in 5 sentences. It contains proposal to revive the economy with a focus on working people and criticizes free market consumerism, unregulated free trade, and the collusion between the political class and rentier elites. The proposals aim to establish collectivist values and address the shrinking aggregate demand, stagnant wages, and excessive debt. The immediate measures include repatriation of export incomes, cancelling tax holidays for corporations, re-exporting vehicles, and re-incentivizing dollar liquidation of luxury condominiums, and managing foreign exchange inflows through a separate investment fund. The long-term measures involve import substitution and industrialization, strengthening local food production, supporting small and medium industries, and implementing an expansionary public expenditure program. The goal is to transform the economy, promote worker control, and redirect resources towards productive sectors. So another author said, alternatives offered are not capable of taking the country forward. On the contrary, they are more likely to take the country back further. It is up to people like us to make that strategic plan, first, and secondly, convince the people. This country appears more and more to be ungovernable. Ultimately, it may end up in a military government like Egypt or Thailand. Universities in Sri Lanka only degree factories. There's no R&D, no research at all in political science. Now, the last one, obviously, I was a university teacher. The problem in R&D is not really, not the enthusiasm, is there's no money for R&D, and it's very hard to get any money for research, proper research work. I mean, once I started a research project based on a grant, and I had to pocket it out because they cut my grant halfway through the project. So you can't reduce research projects like that. If you take the world rank, the University of Colombo is 1,531. The fourth in Sri Lanka is University of Peradeniya, 1972. So you can see that we still have a long way to go, but we are working. But see the importance of needing the balance. Now, this is from this morning's paper. Personal income tax shock dims economic activities. Now, based on IMF proposals, the income tax went up for middle work class. And what happened was they're not spending money on many things. So as a result, many of the micro enterprise and whatever are not doing that well. So this is from this morning. So this is why we need balancing the impact needs wider thinking before anything is implemented. So it's not that simple. How it reacts is a different thing. So today the proposals, I welcome Dhanusha to talk about his proposals, and I'll be grateful if you all think about it carefully and then say the pros and cons. If you need a poll, I may consider doing a poll to see what people think about it as we go along. Okay, welcome, Dhanushka. You are also a co-host, so if you want to share your things, you can do that. So we are here, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chula, for organizing this presentation. I mean, you took so much of effort to organize and circulate the document. Thank you so much. And thank you for the comments and everything. So I will, first of all, as well, when we had a chat, you suggested that we should first go one by one in what's in the proposals. So I think that will be much more easier to make it much more easier to follow. I think there were some misunderstandings also when it comes to a few of these proposals. And first of all, am I audible, Chula?
Yeah, I can hear you very well. I mean, sometimes broadband issues, so I have put my camera off, so you can use your.
Yeah, I have the same issue, so that's why.
Yeah. So
then I will. So I'll just give before I move into the actual proposals, I'll just give a brief comment about the introduction and what the purpose of that is. So it's just an overview of the concepts that are lying at the basis of these proposals. So we are trying to promote, like one of the writers have sort of highlighted in 5 points. So we are basically trying to promote a more collectivist or more people-oriented program in contrast to these IMF-led proposals, which are actually put most of the population right down to poverty, and with all these tax increases, while the inflation rate is high, they've increased the taxes also, and for very little purpose. If I just mention few numbers now, the whole the budget was 2023 budget, which was completely drafted according to, say, IMF principles and proposals. The main objective of that is to increase government revenue. But as we will see in our proposals also, we have addressed this issue about government revenue. which has been quite high, over 22 to 23%, right up to mid 1990s. So it collapsed uh, since like 1995. We will address that also, what the reasons behind that. And we have reduced that up to below 9%. But all these bigger now, a few of the people who have commented also raised this question about taxation and this. That I just thought of saying something before we start up the proposals. So even after these draconian taxes, government revenue is expected to increase only by 2 percentage points of the GDP, whereas our tax ratio has collapsed from 23 to below 9%, which is a major, I mean, the increase is so massive that even these type of tax increases are actually quite worthless when it comes to, although it has increased the government revenue, as a percentage of GDP, it is not so meaningful, these increases. So that is because they haven't really addressed the key problems which initially led to the collapse of our tax revenue. So, and we are also focusing on consumerism, especially urban or even rural middle classes thrive in consumerism, and how this has also led to not just the foreign exchange crisis, that also we are leading into a ecological crisis. Uh, so then, with that small background, let me just begin. So our initial proposal is to basically repatriate foreign exchange that has left through our trading account. So this is what we call in economics capital flight through the trade account. Now it has happened basically in two ways. One is that the exporters have this. I believe this was going on for a very short period of time. This is not our main concern, that they have not repatriated some amount of their incomes. That is, we can focus on that. That is a minor issue, which I think that can be easily addressed. And second one is the more serious issue, which is actually a global problem, which is called trade transfer mispricing, trade misinvoicing. There are few ways that happen. This takes place in, especially in underdeveloped countries like us. So, and this is a well recognized problem in the world, especially the UN has included this issue into their SDGs 16.4 Sustainable Development Goals. So there was this particular report that came out that estimated a figure somewhere around US dollars 40 billion. Has they have flows, these illicit flows containing 40 billion. Now that doesn't mean I think I should clarify also what this figure means and what illicit flows mean. It is not necessarily only foreign exchange outflows. There are ways outflows happen both through goods and through foreign exchange. Say, for instance, uh, we can import under invoicing, which I think many people are aware that it is happening. So in the case of import under invoicing, a country will lose out in the form of goods. So, what happens there is that imports that were not supposed to take place. Let's say you have a particular luxury commodity, the import tax is somewhere around 50 to 60%. So the importer, what he would do is that he would under invoice, so as to reduce the tax burden, the tax imposed on that particular import. So when you under invoice it, the whole purpose of higher taxation is defeated. Now the higher taxation of those particular, let's say, a luxury type of commodities is there not only to increase government revenue, it's also there to discourage those type of imports, because it's a drain on the foreign exchange and it is a waste of foreign exchange savings that could have been used productively in productive sectors. Now, the meaning of productivity also has to be addressed. It's not what we just normally generally think as, earning profits and so on. Productivity has a specific meaning in economics. But I don't know whether we have all that time to go through. But just to clarify on what this $40 billion mean. So this contains 4 types of illicit flows, which are what you get import under invoicing that happens through a form of goods. So you are basically importing goods that are not supposed to come into the economy by bypassing these tax measures. And so that is also a drain of foreign exchange. I suppose that is clear. If
Yeah,
not, we can.
Dhanush, I think you put a lot of points that might need discussion. Within
All
that,
right.
shall we do a little discussion on what you've already presented and proceed?
Let me, Chulal, can
Yeah,
you let me finish on this trade
yeah,
misinvoicing thing?
yeah.
So, because there are 3 more, so then it will be clear what, then we can, I think that will be better. So then you get import over invoice. Now, this is also a very serious problem. I have gone into certain numbers also, which is happening quite at a rate in Sri Lanka, both through the private and uh, government sector, especially when it comes to these oil imports that are happening through the government. This has been happening. Over invoicing. So over invoicing means that you are when the taxation is close to zero. This has been so taxation is close to zero on all our BOI company imports. This was made the BOI when the BOI was established in 1990. All the firms that come under registered under the BOI got indefinite tax holidays. No, we will address that point later. So I'm just saying, just to let us have a better idea about what over invoicing is. So when the import taxation is close to zero, um, if well, if the corporates or the government sector elites who would want to shift their capital out of the country, they could use this method to bypass the capital controls in the capital and the financial account. So they over invoice. Say if a particular good is valued at $100, they can mention in the invoice saying it is 120. So they can purchase from the market with whatever the domestic currency they have, uh, an excessive amount of foreign exchange from the market as a way of shifting currency, shifting the capital out of the economy, which is very dangerous because over invoicing involves not only, it doesn't have anything to do with foreign exchange uh, generated by, say, the exporters. It also involves foreign debt, remittances. All those inflows can actually go out of a country through over invoicing. This has been very well studied and documented uh, by economists who have gone into, especially like people like James Boyce, and there's all these publications by Oxford University. If you want, I can give you the titles and the links to it. So they have studied this further. I will go into that later. And then you have export under invoice, which of course I guess you all know. Exporter could not reveal the proper figure. Uh, they will undervalue it, and they are then, by that way they are capable of not repatriating their 100% of their income. So all those 3 constitute outflows both in cash and goods. So uh, so those are the 3 main ways, and then you get export over invoicing. Now export over invoicing is, well, someone could say that is an inflow, but that is not the case. Now export over invoicing, I believe that is also happening in Sri Lanka. So now this 40 billion would involve export over invoicing also. So that amount should be reduced. But then one would argue, then export over invoicing is good for an economy. Then why are people complaining about it? That depends on the purpose of export over invoicing. So now I've read about this in other countries like Pakistan and so on. The main purpose of export over invoicing by the conglomerates is when there are export what you call incentive schemes by the government. Uh, so that incentive is given as a tax rebate for every additional dollar you are earning. So when you are over invoicing, the corporates are capable of basically uh, giving you drawing government's tax income as tax rebates. So this has been happening in some countries, and I believe it is happening in Sri Lanka also. There are evidence for export over invoicing also. So whenever there are tax incentives given for export development, these mechanisms are misused, and but this volume should be deducted from this whatever this 40 billion figure what you're saying. But then there are other negative aspects of reducing government revenue, because when they are paying tax rebates, obviously the government revenue goes down, and these rebates have not served any purpose. These are just fake figures and export incomes that are shown but are actually not there. And this is also, these are the four forms of trade misinvoicing, and there are ways to
Yeah, shall we take
yeah.
some
So
comments from the
how we
audience?
can,
Because I think you've got a lot of information in there. We might forget by
true,
the
yes,
time you go. Any comments
sure.
about this? I mean, I can show some of my experiences, but any comments from the audience? Any comments from the audience about this? Anybody? No.
Uh,
Yeah, come on.
uh,
Yeah. Yes, Gresham.
Chula, Dhanusha,
Hi,
one of
Grace.
the over invoicing scenarios could be money laundering as well. So
Yeah,
if somebody wants to launder money, over invoice and get that as legitimate foreign exchange. Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, Dhanisha, can I make some comments in relation to what you said? Because I want the audience to make the comments first. Anybody making any comments? Anybody else? No. So I'll put some experiences of my own into you, so you'll understand what we're saying. Now, in relation to the income tax, our income tax in Sri Lanka is at roughly about 7% from what we earn, and the highest income tax in the world is in France. It's about 35%. So why we are having so much hardship with the income tax is our salaries are so low compared to the expense that we have. That's why we are feeling it so badly here. That's number one. Number two is about this over invoicing and under invoicing. It's actually corruption that is there. I'll tell you one example. I knew there was a medical equipment importation. This was done from Japan, okay? So we think, oh, Japan, it must be a good company and all that. It's actually a Japanese company registered by a Sri Lankan chap in Japan. That's how it goes. So when we import something, we say we are going to import from Japan. So you get an invoice from Japan. But actually, this company, which is a Sri Lankan company registered in Japan, does this import it from Ukraine, and it's directly delivered to Sri Lanka as an import from Japan. So what we get, say, what we are sold for $300, they'll buy it for $100 from Ukraine. And so there's a huge corruption happening even before we know that it has happened, that before we order. So that's one thing. Then about repatriation of money that's earned from foreign exports of our goods. I'll give you one example. My brother works in a company who's been exporting flowers and plants abroad from Nurelia. And he was telling me that suddenly you got a law saying that 25% of the income has to be liquidated on the date received to rupees when the dollar was so unstable, and that they could not import anything they wanted. So this is another issue that is there, so that if you want to take a dollar even to try to import anything, there's so much bureaucracy. I mean, you try it yourself, it's impossible. And I face it myself, some exchange money, when you want to get it, they won't give it to you. So you have really hard time trying to get any dollars at all. And then the other experience about that I have about taxes is the corruption within the income tax department itself. I mean, I used to get the calculated tax perfectly on my incomes, and then when I resigned from the government job, so I wanted, my accountant told me you got a refund of tax about 5 lakhs, which I overpaid. So then I said, okay, I'll get it. But then I was told I had to go and speak to the commissioner because she wanted to meet me. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll go there. So I went to meet her. There was nothing. I said, actually, doctor, it's very good. We actually calculated your refund. It's now 8 lakhs and not 5 lakhs. So I said, okay, very good. Then I came back and my accountant tells me that, okay, you hadn't get your 8 lakhs, but they are demanding 3 lakhs, but they have overcalculated as that it should go back to them. So in an undercut hand. So you can see the corruption, how it's taking place. Even if the person wants to be honest, this is how it works within the country. So most of these invoicing issues are reflection of the corruption that is there in the country. And there are 2 other people who have raised hands. Ranjan, yes, Ranjan, you can go forward, Ranjan.
Thank you, Chula. Today's discussion is on alternative proposals. Mr. Patirina is going to tell us what the alternative proposals are to revive the economy. Now, this taxation is not going to, if you improve the taxation, it's not going to revive the economy. It'll only cause a very, very small dent. See, there is about 40 billion or so of money that should have come into the country and which is parked outside. That is true. Now, is Mr. Patirana suggesting that we chase this 40 billion? Yes, we should. I agree. But when are we finally going to win that battle? How long will that take? In the meanwhile, how many more children will be joining the ranks of malnutrition? It won't solve the problem. You see, in the there is an immediate problem. You see, we have to revive the economy and we want to find ways and means of doing it. The IMF gave money. That's immediate. You see, in the short term, to help us out of this financial difficulty, our liquidity problem. We are talking about corruption, which is not going to, we will not be able to eliminate corruption overnight. You see, it's going to be a long-term plan, long-term program. But what is immediately required is to stop this hunger. More and more people joining the ranks of hungry people. You see, what are we doing? This is absurd. We are wasting our time. I think this program, Chula, you have only about 2 hours or 2.5 hours. When are we going to tackle the major issues? Now, already it's more than half an hour gone. See, this won't solve the, this is not an alternative proposal at all. And I might say that I read this article. I'm very happy that Chula circulated this. Some of the comments were absolutely on the spot on. They're dead right. You see, if we implement these proposals, we are somebody is trying to restart what we tried out for the last 50 years, and the result is utter economic ruination. Point one. Point two is these policies, these socialist socio-economic policies were tried out in the countries of their authors, Russia, China. Where did Russia end up? See, they were given about 75 years to prove that the socio-economic policies, populist policies, or whatever name you give it, are superior to the capitalist free market policies, and they ended up, ironically, they ended up in capitalism feeding communism, capitalism feeding communism. See, finally, it was America and Canada that had to send grain to Russia, because there was starvation when economic collapsed in Russia. Then in the case of China, which also tried out these policies, and what happened? You see, China had wiser leadership in 1978. Then Xiang Jinping, he realized that this can never produce the results we want. And what did he say? You see, it does not matter if the cat is made even out of clay, so long as it catches mice, and turn communism and these policies on its head. Today, China has so many hundreds of thousands of millionaires. See, thousands of millionaires they have today. So he turned. That is how China became a world power. You see, these policies won't work. As somebody said, I fully agree with him. I congratulate him for saying that if we adopt these policies, Sri Lanka will go back to the Stone Age. I don't think Sri Lanka will even exist. It will be divided up between China and India. China and India are not going to fight for us. You see, they'll agree to separate the country, and take one half will be taken by China and the other half will be taken by China, India. You know, this is madness. Thank you.
Okay, Ranjan, Lakshman, your comments as well. Can I just make a comment? Because I think it's a large document, and trying to find a solution or a proposal, at least modify one of them, is good within the 2 hours that we have. I don't want to go too long, but we can take it up again and again and discuss. Yeah, Lakshman, yes.
Thank you, Chula, and thank you, Dhanusha, for the presentation. I have a quick question. Now you have identified this over-invoicing and under-invoicing issue. What the government or the bank or the customs, the banking system can do to prevent this? I mean, this has been going on, and this will go on even in the future. So is there a government machinery to take control of this and avoid or minimize this?
Yeah. Shall I first start with Mr. Ranjan's comments? So
yeah, sure.
Then I'll respond to you, Mr. Lakshman.
Yeah,
so now, Mr. Ranjan, this is not a socialist proposal, and these proposals have not been tried elsewhere. Also, this is not suggesting a fully socialist type of a government, and I think that will be made clear if we go through each proposal one by one closely. If you can have the time to stick with us, maybe it might become more clear. But we just started off with this over-invoicing issue. Yes, it is corruption, as you said, that it has been happening. So the point about now, and you also very correctly mentioned, this is a problem of liquidity. So, and that our people are starving. So we also have to settle our foreign exchange issue. So this is one method of one method of addressing that foreign exchange shortage. Yes, it will take some time, of course, but if there is a government that is dedicated for this purpose, not like few people in their off time trying to go through UN data and uncover things, that could take quite a long time. But if there is a dedicated government, now that this issue has been exposed, if there's a dedicated government with a team of experts, this can be done in a very short time. So, and if we are just neglecting this issue, we are basically allowing that to happen, right? And the other thing is this, from 1977, all these free market measures have been implemented. So this whole collapse is actually, you can blame it on the free market forces that are also, you can't detach it with corruption. Corruption goes hand in hand with that, and there are, and when it comes to developed advanced capitalist countries, their systems are much more different and developed. So we cannot compare the absence of corruption and all that type of things in advanced capitalist countries, and you can't compare it with what is going on here. So we have to have an open mind of what is going on in the economy first of all, and then only we can devise proposals. So I have only talked about this this over invoicing issue because there was a huge debate or argument that went on WhatsApp about that particular issue. And this is not the only solution that we are suggesting. There are a list of solutions how to address the foreign exchange crisis. If now we obviously will have to increase the food production, and then production overall generally in the economy, and production in more technologically advanced sectors which are more interlinked, and that way only you get a type of an industrial transformation of the economy which would lead towards higher productivity, higher incomes, and that would inevitably address hunger. As a short-term measure also, you need capital. So so to address that issue, only we are suggesting these so-called we can say relatively new measures to address that foreign exchange shortage, and those funds will be used to revive food production. Without having access to all that foreign, especially we need foreign exchange because we don't have a capital goods sector producing machinery and so on, which are required for reviving of agriculture. You can't just start planting next day. You need particular machinery, imports and so on, which are not produced here. So at least initially you would need to import it. For that imports, you would need foreign exchange. So if you listen to the entire set of proposals, they are all interlinked. So we discuss them one by one. And of course, yes, this is a critique of the free markets, and especially how free markets function in countries like us, not in general, right? Not in general. So we are focused on what is happening in countries like us, and specifically Sri Lanka. And you commented about Soviet Union and China. So those have nothing to do with what we have proposed, and we are basically taking examples from Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan when it comes to agriculture and transforming these industries, especially the small scale type of industries which the Japanese and the Taiwanese, South Koreans pioneered. The East Asians pioneered that after the 1950s, and of course with both state and private sector participation. That is what we are suggesting. So I think you got a bit too excited about these proposals, and I can assure, I can say that you shouldn't worry too much about it. And these are not things that have tried. They are mostly borrowed from countries like Taiwan and South Korea, not China. So I won't go into what China and Soviets did, because that would take going in a different direction. That is not our purpose. And
Yes.
then Mr. Lakshman raised the question about what measures we can take to stop this from happening? Yes, so that is our immediate goal is to actually stop this from happening immediately, and then the second step would be to do a financial audit where exactly this money has flown into, both in the form of foreign exchange and in the form of commodities. So what the writers have suggested is actually a combined effort of the banking system, the central bank, and the customs. For that, you need political initiative, initiative by the governments. This is not something that, say, people like in the central bank do not know. In fact, as far back as in 2006, the central bank itself, now when we were writing about this, the governor basically denied this. That he said this is happening, but it's not like it's not their business, something like that. That was his response, and that it can't be so huge. The numbers can't be so large. So, but it's the central bank itself. When he himself was in the central bank, I think he was in a higher up position during that time. In 2006, they published a pamphlet through the central bank itself about money laundering and terrorism, and they highlighted this problem of misinvoicing is used to transfer funds out of the country, which is having a significant impact. So you can't blame the central bank. Say the central bank doesn't know. So all these things happen, like Dr. Chula also mentioned, that that how he experienced that in the health sector. So this is not a problem just specific to a particular sector, but this is happening by the coordination through the government and the corporates. So it's a combined process. So for instance, I was looking into some figures of I'll just say here, you have to now do a in detailed analysis. In 2021, there were oil imports from UAE, and the figures mentioned in the UAE export data is roughly around $500 million, while our figures are close to $1,300 million. So there's a massive gap, which clearly points to over invoicing that cannot be reconciled by the FOB and CIF price gaps and other basically the gap arises from that, if not misinvoicing and other criteria. So and that has clearly happened through the government, because it's these are imports made by the CPETCO, and similarly these things happen through the private sector. So it's a combined process. Both private sector and government are involved. So it's the initiative that is required to it can be easily done. For instance, like now this global financial integrity, they have a application which they actually give. They can provide to governments, where they provide real-time data if a particular trade has some abnormal pricings, abnormal values compared to the world market prices. So it can be easily detected. And I have actually informed the central bank also about this. I've talked to them personally also. So then they have also raised this question. So as if like they had to know anything about it, but they themselves have published pamphlets about it. So that you can actually use these applications. Yeah.
Thanks, Danusha. Yeah, thanks. There are two other people who raised their hand.
Yes. Yeah,
And I just have to say that we are actually trying to help you, because the alternative proposal that is valid and good, we all will be able to support it to get it implemented. So if you have a very good proposal, at least one bit, like about overpricing and underpricing, how to address it, it will be very good. So and these people who are contributing are very experienced in their own ranks, and therefore let's see what others have to say. Greshan, yes, Greshan.
Chula, I go after Nirmalan. Let him come first, and then I'll comment.
Yes, Nirmalan. Yes, you're welcome. First time I'm seeing you. Thank you very much for joining.
Hi, Nirmalan.
Hi,
We have
hi.
thanks.
Yes, we have. So I'm very glad actually that you have brought your perspective to the table. I think it is very important, and I think that there are lots of social forces that are arrayed behind this perspective that you have been articulating fairly eloquently. And I think that engaging those social forces is going to be very important if we are going to successfully restructure the economy of this country and also its political structures and processes in a way that resolves the crisis that we have largely created for ourselves. Now, I presume that in bringing this perspective to the table, your objective has been to garner support and some kind of support and acceptance for what you are proposing. Now, in order to do that, it is important that we are able to comprehend this proposal in depth and give it due consideration. So I am coming to you right now with a problem. Before I can address your solution at all, I need to understand very clearly the basis on which your proposal, your alternative has been structured. Because this, I'm not very familiar with this basis on which you have structured this alternative. The first thing that I require is a clear understanding of what you mean by the rentier class. Because if you look at the causes that you have identified, you find unregulated free trade, illicit capital flows, the conduct of the political class. Those three are fairly easy to understand. But the fourth one, government bureaucracy colluding with domestic rentier class, requires me to understand what this domestic rentier class is. So the first thing I need to know is what definition you are using of this rentier class. Secondly, I need to understand what functions this rentier class plays within the economy. And the third thing that I need to know is your quantitative measurement of the rentier class and its subcomponents. So I know you cannot probably give me these things right now, and that's not what I expect, but I expect this discussion to be widened in order to bring in these fundamentals, without which I don't think we will be able to do justice to this proposal that you have actually put forward, which I would like to do justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Nirmalan, for that comment. Dhanusha, do you want to answer that first and then
Yeah,
the
sure. I think shall I respond, and shall we move on to question later, or anything is?
Just answer for Nirmalan first, and then
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Nirmalan, for your comments. So yes, it's actually Rontier pronounced, if I'm not mistaken. This is a concept basically put forward by economic anthropologist called Veblen. Back in the day, he's not a socialist. So what he meant by rentier was that people who have access to assets over involvement in entrepreneurship. So their main means of income is through access to assets and transfer of resources between sectors. It could be capital gains, it could be rent incomes, and so on. But the basic means of appropriating their incomes are not directly related with entrepreneurial initiative. And then we have to again classify what type of entrepreneurial intervention which we are looking at when it comes to Sri Lanka, because now one could argue then people like who have invested in garments manufacturing are important. Well, they are important to a certain extent, but the problem with those type of investments is that now this is very widely discussed. So I'm moving a little bit away from the idea of rentier, just to, we need to sort of compare and contrast to get a better understanding, I guess. So even if you're saying, say, if you take the garments manufacturing, it's a very low tech sector, and the technology has not transformed since it started in the 70s. Apart from changing from the source of power for peddling to actually electrically powered machinery, apart from that, the ratio of labor to the capital has remained the same, stagnant. So and the demand for these products also vary. I mean, that we can address. Maybe we can just neglect that. But the problem with that is that the productivity over time in those type of sectors tend to stagnate. And our problem is we haven't gone into its backward linkages. So when you go now, a country like Bangladesh recently have gone into backward linkages, so their overall cost structure goes down. Not just so we are just trying to compete by slashing labor laws and suppressing wages, but our wage rates are comparable with the Bangladesh. I'm just saying, just to clarify this, comparable to Bangladesh. I have checked the figures, so it's basically equal to the women's per hour wage rate is equal to that of Bangladesh in Sri Lanka. But still, these garment factories are moving to Bangladesh because they have built up these backward linkages, producing the fabric and so on. So the overall cost is going down. But for us, we have to import all these things, the fabric, and that increases the unit costs. So what I mean is that even in things like garments, their merchandising component is much more greater in acquiring the profits. So it's like an assembling job that they're doing. It's not actually a modern industrial production that would lead into other externalities and growth of technology and absorption of the labor force into a higher level of technically intensive industries where wages would rise, and there is a demand for universities, demand for knowledge, and the entire society transforms with that type of a leap in the production structure. But our corporate sector has not taken that step, and then the particular rentier type, would I say, is like the commercial elite who are actually dependent on imports to increase their profits, and these let's say the luxury condominiums and so on. So these things are not what we call entrepreneurship driven. Their main involvement in increasing their profits is basically through access to their assets, or not necessarily to machinery and capital goods. So that is the idea behind Rontia. I don't know whether that was clear.
Yes, Nirmalan, have you got at least some answers to you?
Yes, to some extent, Dhanusha, yes, you have pointed me in the correct direction, but what I will be needing in order to really try to evaluate your proposal is some actual data on this. You know, how big is this Rontier class in Sri Lanka, and how big are its components? I would say that we talk about this national debt, and if there is a very active and powerful or strong Rontier class, they would own a significant part of that national debt, I would expect. Yes, condominiums and other types of investments as well, which behave differently in the market. So I would like to have that kind of information. I'm not in a hurry. I'm looking at a long discussion where we actually explore each other's perspectives and perhaps come to a synthesis somewhere down the line. So there's no hurry. And thank you very much for the bit of information you've given me.
Yes, thank you, Nirmalan. I agree with you. Even if we discuss this one topic and good discussion, so Dhanushka can alternately find a better way of writing it up, that's an achievement. So that is what we are trying to do. If not, we'll allocate more time in the future. I mean, there's no problem, because after all, we all are trying to help the country recover properly, and not in a big hurry to do things might make things worse. And that's what it is. And got Gratian. Yes, Gratian. Gratian?
Thank you, Chula. Yeah. So I think, I mean, I will start on the rentier because rentier means basically passive income generation. So you don't get actively involved in this thing. You are earning on the assets, whether it is treasury bonds or condominiums or something else, or lending money. Say, for instance, the country was in the grip of the money lenders before the Bank of Ceylon and the People's Bank were initiated by the government. The entire the business community was in their hands, and I'm not going to say certain terms, but I can say that on a private discussion. Then the other thing is this rentier mentality. Rentier mentality even among the entrepreneurs. So what they try to do is to engage in a business and then take some money out from the business to the detriment of the business. Business does not expand. And take that money and buy a condominium, buy a BMW, Merc, whatever it is, or buy a flat in or apartment or a house in Melbourne or in London. This is the scenario. So the rentier mentality into the enterprises, that's another thing. Then when we look at the under-invoicing and over-invoicing, this is a much bigger problem. What Danusha has put out is only the tip of the iceberg. So there is a large migrant community outside the country, right? I have been into a few countries and I see there is a lot of Hawal type scenarios in all these countries, and they are all interconnected. It is not Vellavatta and Hospital Street, but it is in Paris, it is in Rome, it is in London, it is everywhere. What they do is they collect a lot of foreign exchange in those countries and then use those reserves to over-invoice and under-invoice. Then there are companies that have set up their own satellite operations, like a company operating, corporate, conglomerate operating in Colombo. They have their own fully owned subsidiaries in Melbourne, in London, and the transactions are entirely between these two. They invoice each other. So in that invoicing, they fix the books. So this is done by the multinationals. That is called the transfer pricing, very well known. Yeah. And in this context, there is a very important role for the customs. In the 2000s, in the year 2000, early 2000s, the central bank was monitoring everything that was going out and saying, okay, you have sent $5,000 to this one, prove that you have imported the goods. Goods have been received. It was being policed. And the customs were saying, you have imported these goods, but we think, I mean, these goods are worth more than this, right? Because the customs has an investigation unit. Then on top of that, there is a profession called auditors, chartered accountants, who are empowered to audit these accounts of the corporates and the individuals and come up with the certificate whether they are doing their business legitimately. But what they do is they say, we do a sample audit and we disclaim our responsibility. So this entire thing is a much bigger fraud than what we all can even imagine. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Greshan. Chula, can I respond a little bit more to Nirmalan? I think I
you can answer because this is a discussion which is trying to be constructive. So it's good to answer.
No, because apart from asking about the Ronke, he was asking about the basis of these proposals, like where it is coming from. So basically, it is proposing a mixed system, Nirmalan. But it is the form of the mixture that they're trying to present here. That what type of a mixture are we proposing between the state and the private sector? So we are proposing a particular restructuring of economy, which is I should say initiated by the government and with collaboration of the private sector, similar to what happened in countries like especially South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan. So mostly we are borrowing from the models employed in those countries, but also adapting to our current requirements also, like these, this issue of capital flight, illicit flows, and of course at that time it was not there. So we are facing those issues, and the issue of consumerism was not there to that extent. It was there because it was mainly a landowning an economy led by the landowners to a certain extent in South Korea and so on in that period, which was transformed. Actually, it was transformed through the intervention of the United States. I just to highlight to Mr. Ranjan. So in the 1950s. So, and through a government mechanism, a planned process, and through these type of interventions. So the United States is not like alien to these type of programs. So yes, just to say that this is we are trying to address the economic the issues in the economic structure, as well as the short-term issues like hunger and all that so on, and the foreign exchange liquidity, in a way that it also connects with the programs we have proposed to address the structural imbalances. So that's like the basis of it. But say mostly promoting collectivist values like critique of consumerism, like and which is even happening in the Western Europe. So yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Danusha, there's another person. Yeah.
So Chula, can I just give him one more comment before we move on to I think Lasil is there. So, Danusha, listening to what you're saying about this illicit capital flows, studying what's been happening over the years, I go back for the whole 75 years. To me, it's beginning to look as though the sort of economic activities that we have been engaged in, the way we have structured our economy, has actually given rise to a sort of a criminal class. I mean, for want of a better word, which I would like to call the crooked class, which has now actually seized the state. And it has actually perverted the legal structure, making wrong into right and right into wrong. And when you listen to what Gratian said a little while ago, and you take into account what I'm telling you now, you will understand the magnitude of this problem. And I think we are going to need concentrated, carefully coordinated global approach to solve this problem out. So when you are looking at the alternatives, I think we've got to widen our conceptual framework to include all those scales. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I mean, Danusha, you see the comments coming through in relation to the root causes of the problem. It's good to address that as well at the same time, what you address to see the effects of the problem. So I've got another three participants. Oppo A16 is the next person. I don't know the number.
That is me. It's me, Chula Lasil.
Yeah, Lasil. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Welcome.
I'm sorry, I just got a little late also, and so sorry for all that. Yeah. Actually, I listened to a number of them basically, and your presentation too, and you raised about some issue where a Japanese, one of our people who had the company there and invoicing all that and doing all that. Actually, I like to say it this way, based on all what I heard, I would love to say it this way. It's all, policy formulation or at least implementation or lack of monitoring, all that, right? And it is very important, whatever said and done, to revive all that is here. Unless you do that, there's no way, because the biggest problem right now, like what you said, when I was handling this corruption, basically, I was particularly they really wanted to throw me out because there was a fraud of 15 billion, right? B. And that was rice. Actually, they had imported rice. It was stated government to government, which was not correct. And that was imported through various other forms, channels. And the rice that was imported was totally unfit for human consumption. Now, having found all those, we took steps to seal all those containers and went into investigations and all that. And there was pressure for me to release all that. Actually, we didn't do that. So unfortunate situation is there were a number of issues that was raised with regard to undervoicing, over-invoicing, all that. I would love to say it this way. Why does it happen? You know, in this country, there are all those institutions like government audit, and even in those departments, institutions, they have their internal audit, all those, everybody, right? And there are rules and regulations how to do it. But all that doesn't happen that way. Like what I told you, what has gone wrong? Basically, all the policy making or monitoring, implementation, I mean, all that is not functional in that way. They do it the way they want. So this has to, you have to put an end to all that. All what I suggest is basically our problem when we talk about all that. Ultimately, it's a governance issue. You know, broadly, it's a governance issue. It is very important. Unless you put the government structure right, I don't think anything is possible. Now, we are talking about the shortages, right? We are talking about even in regard to the purchases of medicine or even, you know, whatever. All that is so corrupt, but you are not in a position, you have not been able to successfully catch hold of any of those, you know, I would call it rogues or whoever. So for that matter, that is basically our problem. Now, this is a group of people who are fairly educated. They understand everything, what has really gone wrong. My humble request is basically, all these are all due to bad governance. Actually, it is governance ultimately that will be broadly, I mean, may help us in order to put the whole thing right. Now, look at the big picture. When you look at the big picture, we know about even the taxes, right? It's a small percentage of people who pay taxes, and even that is not collected. So that again, those are similarly shortcomings. Now, our discussion is about how to revive the economy. There are so many ways of reviving the economy. There's no way, unless we have the entire system, basically starting from parliament, right? We have to create a culture where our leaders, they run the country in a way so that this kind of things will not be permitted. Let me say that this way, basically, all what I want to say is, all these economic issues, all the other issues, all the whatever lack of various other formalities, you know, implementation of various whatever, but it is monitoring, all those are problems owing to basic issues such as our inability to implement those rules, laws, all that. Now see, Article 148 of the Constitution specifically says that the Parliament is responsible, but the Parliament is not doing their role, or at least doing their job correctly. And there is nobody to take them to task. Unfortunate situation is, even recently, we know this guy used the members, you know, whatever perks, benefits and facilities came through and brought gold and all that, right? Can that be permitted? So what are the other avenues they could always, I mean, they will do in order to ensure their interests are taken care of, but they neglect the interest of the people. You know, there's a thing called social contract, but unfortunately, they have no regard whatsoever with regard to all that. So my humble request is, when we have to discuss these things, it is very important that we have to understand there's a bigger issue than that, and that is a governance issue. Let me end that. Thank you very much.
Danusha, you want to answer that? And I think you're getting good suggestions to make your proposal very strong and focused, so that at least you got one thing sorted. And in your proposal, if you address the root causes to some extent, I think we may be able to take it forward to a higher level and get it implemented. So yes, Gracian and Ranjan, you raised hand again. Danusha, you want to answer first?
No, I think he was making broadly comments. No, so is there a particular question which was raised? Sorry if I didn't follow.
Yeah, all what I want to ask you, right?
Yeah.
Now you raised very pertinent issues, and actually most of those issues needs to be corrected. Unless they are corrected, this will go on, and you will never be able to, create an economy or a country where people would ultimately be happier, or at least where you could, we have to have governance in place. The biggest problem is that unless you change the system or at least revive the system, can you achieve all what you spoke of?
Yeah. So, Mr. Lassil, so the intention of these proposals is, of course, yes, it would be good if some of them actually finds their way into government policy framework. But we hardly doubt it would happen, as you correctly suggested now, as Nirmalan also very clearly pointed out. This particular, like a criminal, there's a corporate class that is engaged in these particular activities together with the bureaucracy, government bureaucracy, and the political elite. So, and they have captured the state. So without addressing that, you can't implement these things, as you rightly question. So the idea about why we are trying to, while we know that, why we are trying to push these proposals like into the public domain, is to get traction among the public. Look here, there are alternatives outside this extremely oppressive framework that is pushed down the throat of the Sri Lankans through the IMF for the sake of getting debt restructuring with the foreign creditors, and ultimately it's the normal people who had nothing to do with this bringing the country to this level. They are the ones who are being made to pay and suffer. So we are trying to show, look, there is another way out, but I mean, as you can see, I mean, we need to build some awareness about it. So the whole idea behind this is to build some awareness, and that there is some hope in some collective action that we can get out of this whole mess. But these there are particular ways that we can do it, not by every other way. So and that too. Give some background and criticism about the whole economic structure and the class-based structure that is that we have inherited. So to give some form of a critique of that and critique of this absurd consumerism that people are chasing behind. So and collate all that into these proposals so that it leads to some form of a discussion and gain some traction, some resonance among the public. So I mean, even so, this is not looking at some political program, but it's actually trying to address how people think and view this problem.
I think Tanusha, you're absolutely right, but you have to present it in that way. So when you say against, say, IMF proposals are bad, then that is not what you're really saying. You're saying the impact of the IMF proposals can be mitigated. That's what you're saying. So you need to, if you want support for this from everybody, I think you got to, one is make it simple so everybody understands. And the two is get the support of everyone. So you don't antagonize someone to try to get support. It doesn't work because you are getting support from everyone here, but the critique is actually to try to improve it. So if you have at least one question today, address and then revise that about over-invoicing, underinvoicing, and its root causes, and then how to address it, then all these people will support you to get it done. So Gracian and Ranjan, yes, you have raised their hands. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. One,
yeah,
the question about this over-invoicing, under-invoicing, and its impact. I think, Chula, you are very correct that if we can understand one issue, one big issue, right? That's very important. Second thing, I will come back to that one. What Lassil said. Hi Lassil. What Lassil
Yeah,
said
how are
is,
you? Hi.
yeah, what Lassil said is basically the core problem, the underlying problem. The mother of all these problems is lack of governance. So even in these proposals, I think the first one is re-establish the law and order. Then the dynamics of taking the crisis out and getting the country out of the crisis is much bigger than what we think. Because we are, in my last presentation, I very clearly stated that the GDP has fallen by about 17 billion US dollars. And we have gone back to 2011 in GDP per capita. So we have gone back 12 years. And to come back to 2011, we will have to spend the way it is until 2000 and whatever it is, 30, 32, we don't know. There is no time frame that is given. There is no mechanism given in the IMF bailout. IMF bailout is some sanctions, on the government. You do this. But they are necessary, but not sufficient to take the country out of the crisis. So this is, if we address this one problem, over-invoicing and under-invoicing, this thing basically creates an unlevel playing field in the local market. Nobody can survive against this criminal elite corporates, because what they do is they operate a criminal operation under the guise of legitimacy, exports, imports, and do ruin the entire entrepreneur sentiment. Say, if a guy who operates in Japan buys vehicles, cannibalizes them, brings them to Sri Lanka, half price, using the reserves that he has on the other side, and sells it at 3 times, buys the properties in the country, buys the companies in the country through the stock exchange, leasing company. Then that leasing company invests in Bangladesh in a micro enterprise, micro finance, and brings in a stash of money back to the country and buys another large thing. So this whole thing, over invoicing, under invoicing, which is very, of that, I think as Chula mentioned, this is a big enough problem. If we fix that problem, the country will have more entrepreneurs, criminal elite corporates, and their backers. There are mega billionaires in dollar terms in Sri Lanka. And they have become billionaires by putting the country down. If they became billionaires in the right way, the country wouldn't be in this position. That is something that we have to understand. So it's like a seesaw. These guys have gone up, the country has come down. Very simple. So these dynamics we'll have to understand. And I think in the WhatsApp group, I put 8 points across how to improve these proposals. What is the rationale? And all that is there. And I think, the proposals are good. They are not ultra socialist or communist. These are mainstream proposals. What we are asking, sometime back I can remember, there was a fixed value for the treated rubber wood to be exported from Sri Lanka. If a cubic meter of treated rubber wood would not yield $300 US, you couldn't export it. Simple. So how about our gems? They are going through the Khane system into various exhibitions, and would they come back? Would the money come back? These are the issues that need to be looked at under this theme of over-invoicing, under-invoicing, and level playing field. All these are connected. But the core problem, as Leslie said, is the governance. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Grecian, for giving so much information that is actually be useful to create this kind of proposal. I suggest to Dhanusha, just focus on at least in this one and make it a separate proposal. Do it very well and very thorough with all the root causes and how to address the root causes as well. Because you need to address the root cause, whatever the superficial effect you're going to achieve. So it's better to say under-invoicing is a problem, but at the same time, try to address the root cause and then develop a proposal for that little bit and then take it from there. Ranjan, yes, Ranjan.
Thank you, Chula. Rectification of over invoicing and under invoicing will not revive the economy. At best, it will only revive it. It will increase the foreign exchange situation in a small way, but it won't expand the economy. What is required are measures to expand the economy. To put it in another way, increase the income, export income, and reduce our import expenditure. That should take priority. Rectification of over invoicing and under invoicing can come afterwards. Because if there is only imports, if there are only exports and imports, the greater the imports and exports, you see, the greater will be this will be issue of invoicing and over invoicing and under invoicing. At the moment, ours is a pittance. One. When we are talking about, so I think with regard to this over invoicing and under invoicing issue, we should take first things first. The second point is the role of the state institutions, customs, the judiciary, law and order, police, and so on. You know, I think we all know that all these institutions are subjugated today. They are all subjugated, subverted, right? When Ali Sabri was caught by the customs, Ali Sabri Rahim was caught by the customs, you see. Finally, he was let off with asking him to pay 7.5 million as a fine, you see. That was customs did it, but on the dictates of the political establishment, no? So what is required is we have to get to the root of the problem, or look at the judiciary. Some cases are not heard at all for 14 odd years. Lasantha Vikramatunga's case, Rajuddin's case, and so many other cases. They're not heard at all. What has happened? So what you find today is the judiciary is subjugated by the political establishment. So let's not talk about, let's not blame these police. I personally won't blame them, the customs. I know there is corruption in customs, see, but there is a political hand behind it. I also would not, you know, the IMF, we are all fond of blaming the IMF. IMF is telling us to do the right thing. See how the Vietnamese, take the Vietnam case. In Vietnam, there were correct rulers and they had the political clout to carry out, you see, to carry out IMF reforms. See, we must remember that IMF never forces any country, any orders any country. They go along with the country and tell what is the right thing, you know, right thing to do. But to do the right thing, the government must be strong enough, you see, to do it. Now, Vietnam, it was strong enough to do it, but we are not. Our government is politically extremely vulnerable, weak. So we can't do it. So now we keep on blaming the
Mr.
IMF.
Ranjan, very clear. Can I respond? Yes. And I have to
Danushka,
respond
go
to
ahead.
two other.
You respond, yeah.
Yes, I think what is missing in our discussion is, I think now the thing is, now I have written quite a lot about how this crisis actually came to this point, theoretical interpretations and so on. There's a paper I published, all that. So that's a separate discussion. So it is very difficult to bring in the causes of the crisis into this particular document, because it will it will be good if we can do that. This will be quite long. So our initial idea was to keep it to about 3,000 words, so we can actually publish it in a local national newspaper. And I have published 5-6 articles on the causes of the crisis, what the root causes and how it actually erupted, and taking a type of a critical view of the mainstream, like the mainstream in the sense what people like Advocata and they must say, like this guy, you all shared that clip by Jafferji. I have constantly I've talked to him. So how they view the problem, that we are not neglecting the fact that the government has borrowed and use that money extremely unproductively. That's one part of the story. So of course we are we have to address that. So but broadly speaking, how to characterize this problem in economics and economic theory, that's a different project, Chula. And if we include all that, this will be like quite long. And I will send you certain articles I've written there. Wrote a series of 3 articles to the FT on the causes of the crisis, and that paper is also on that causes of the crisis. So these are actually measures to address the crisis. So with that background, and I completely agree about the collapse of law and order, and that we should bring that as the key or the starting point, so that everybody is clear on that we are actually addressing that. And yes, and about what Mr. Ranjan said. Now, I think I have to disagree there, because if we, I think we have to initially address this legally. And because in order to revive and expand, and this is exactly, these are proposals aimed at reviving and expanding the income generating process. So, but in order to launch an economic plan like that, you would need initial capital. Without having capital, you can't do that. So that this whole restricting this illicit flows is one way of actually retaining the capital within the country. That would actually increase the national savings. And because any economy, whether it would be socialist, capitalist, whatever, feudalist, whatever, you need savings to revive and expand production. It's completely directly proportional to the amount of tradable savings that you have, not rupees, but tradable savings. That means savings in the form where you can actually purchase capital goods from other countries, so that it could be used in domestic production, expanding. So for that, you need capital. So that is why we need to address this issue that, like Gratian very rightly pointed out, he expanded on it, how huge the problem is, and that if we can address it, it will actually be a great help to address this foreign exchange problem. So of course, yes, growth in exports and all that. So in order to do that, you need capital first. They need an initial pool of capital. That's why we said, and we have also suggested 2 other mechanisms to bring it under the central bank, some sort of an investment fund where that particular fund is there to rectify this issue, to expand incomes and also address issues like hunger. So you can't, and if we wait till some later point to address trade misinvoicing, that initial effort will also go down the drain, because whatever the incomes that are created would also flow out if we don't bring in the legal framework to address that issue. So I think initially, as Gratian and everybody said that we need to bring in that legal framework. So then only you can actually think about doing something meaningful. Because without that, all these leakages would remain, and we are not going anywhere. And about the point about Vietnam now and IMF. So what we are saying is now we are not directly criticizing the IMF, because I have written this many times in the articles which we published before. So initially when this is what I mean, there's lots of things to be discussed. So now when IMF put out its article for consultation in 2022 March, end of March, they did not push down their set of proposals to the government. They identified certain issues. They in fact they identified this issue about over importing of luxury vehicles, over consumption of fuel, and all that they have identified. Not something just we are saying. So they proposed the government to come up with a plan. They didn't push down their proposals. That's like a standard template now, where everywhere they go and do. But now that they used to do that before the 90s. It was very. It was not possible to have some sort of flexible arrangement with IMF, but not with Vietnam. I mean, later on, with the changes in economic theory, like I won't go into that, like institutional economics into studies of monopolies and so on, they opened up into other ways of thinking about economic revival for these countries facing BOP crises. So like Vietnam was one of the first instances. In 1994, Vietnam went, and also in 2001, Vietnam went to the IMF. In Vietnam, these are not the proposals that were implemented in Vietnam. Vietnam, in fact, borrowed from the IMF, used some of those funds to revive their industries, both state and private sector partnerships. And that is not what is happening here, because those are, and it was actually a plan that the Vietnamese government put forward to the IMF. And there was discussions, and then they came to an agreement, and that's how that got underway. Of course, there were disagreements. It's not a smooth process. There was a tug of war between IMF and the Vietnam, and similar to that of South Korea. Now there was no like mindless privatization of everything. Now they're privatizing from profit making to loss making. Everything they're selling, saying that that is going to address the foreign exchange crisis. Now, how is that going to address the foreign exchange crisis? The roots of the foreign exchange crisis is completely somewhere else. It's not dependent on SLT or whatever, right? So, so these are not the things that Vietnam actually, we are quoting Vietnam in these proposals. If you have actually read right up to the bottom, we are suggesting we should take examples from countries like Vietnam, how they actually address their issues together with the IMF, because IMF is absolutely, in my personal view, it is absolutely essential that we engage with the IMF, and IMF is also open to these type of policies. IMF initially asked the government for a plan, and because that we have to address this debt restructuring, there is no other way. If we are saying no to the IMF, then we have to take some uncharted path, like we have to then go and address, we have to find another arbiter like the UN and UNCTAD, which the African nations are trying to do. But I don't know how far they are progressing in that direction. Because of these illicit flows, they are demanding that their debt should be regarded as odious debt. That is a very well documented, data-driven process. But in Sri Lanka, we are lagging behind, where there is no study like that. So UNCTAD is also backing that. They are firmly with the African Union. So that is a different part. I don't think we have time all that to discuss here, but yes. So
Dhanusha, don't worry, because we go step by step, and then we want to make an impact, and then don't think anything is hopeless. We actually can make an impact, and the IMF, I'll refer back We actually wrote to the IMF some time ago when they were developing the proposals, and I'm glad to see some of that actually being incorporated in their final document. So we can make an impact. So don't think we can't. We can. And today you got excellent kind of audience who will support in all aspects, like the experience, the foreign exchange, etc. So take it positively, and what is important is you're talking in a scale of being highest caliber professional. What we need is to address and tell us, like, I'm a medic, I don't understand economics. Somebody like me or advanced level student understand what you're saying. That's what is important. Then only we'll be able to make an impact and get that proposal through to the social setup as well as to institutions like IMF. So Gracian, yes, you raised the hand, Gracian.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
Now I'll give you another perspective of this over-invoicing and under-invoicing. Few weeks ago, our good friend Dr. Tilak Sivalapitiya talked about the electricity, and he mentioned that the current cost of electricity is 40 rupees 14 cents. Rupees 40 rupees and 14 cents. But without doing anything, if we eliminate the over-invoicing of the fuel and coal, this can be brought down to 30 something. So this is electricity, 1/3 less in price. And that is the basis. Energy is the basis of the economy. It's the lifeblood of the economy, like the money. So competitive advantage of the country is ruined by over invoicing at the point of oil and coal. Then
Yeah, absolutely.
Then take all the government organizations, they hire goods and services. Say they are renting massive offices for 5 years, 10 years. Everything is over invoiced. Then they go through the unsolicited proposals. Everything is over invoiced. And before the 2015 election, there was a big ho about construction contracts, especially the highways and big buildings, were overpriced to the extent of 5 times, 10 times. What happened after the 2015? There was a guy called Ravi Karunanayake, who became the finance minister, summoned up all these contractors and said, look, I'm with you. Give me another pack of money and we will sort it out. Was a single contract was revised from 5 times to 10 times to the norm it should be. So these are the things that ruin the government. It increases the government expenditure, reduces the government income, and creates a financial deficit. And it creates a trade imbalance. So these are the double deficit syndrome that is imposed on the country. And it is a design, not default. So once we understand this design, this corrupt, evil design of this criminal elite who are in collusion, the politicians, the bureaucracy, and the corporates. So they are in collusion. They are very strong. They have seized the government. They have taken the people of the country hostage. Let's understand that fundamental thing, the gravity of the problem. They have taken over the law and order. They have imposed their own law and order into the country. Ali Sabri, who it is, that's another name, can go scot-free. He can go scot-free. And can we, appealing to Lasil, can we institute a case against Ali Sabri and the customs?
You can.
We should. And that should be the action. And it should be instituted. If the customs is not going, this has to be a precedence, right? So it was hushed up with a small, this thing. And 1.2 million people left the country last year. And these are people, 311,000 went out for jobs in other countries, and the others went for education and all that. That is a big outflow of money. So, I mean, these corporates, if they were interested, they could have instituted education institutions in Sri Lanka other than condominiums. This is the irresponsibility of the criminal elite corporates in Sri Lanka. So they are not governed by the needs and the wants of the people. They are governed by their own personal luxury and generations to come for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Roshan. We actually now nearly 2 hours, another 50 minutes ago, but Nirmalan has got a comment, and then it's good to make a plan of action, what we need to do. So Danushka, you can make a plan of action based on all the comments. Let's listen to Nirmalan, and then and also I think a comment needs to come in from Lasil as well. And then 2 comments, and then Danusha, let's make a plan how to take this forward. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, yes, Nirmalan.
So Danushka, this is something that I want to point out to you. Now, in order to solve this problem, and the extent of the problem has been now, I think, fairly well described. Roshan did a jolly good job of that. Now, in order to address this problem, it is important to engage as many of what you could call social forces and bring them together on a single focus, which may have several components, and they may come in along the components, but the single focus is important. And that single focus is a clear identification and simple articulation of the causes and various factors that have led us to this problem over the last 75 years. I emphasize last 75 years, because some of the causes of this problem originated even before independence. Others came on later. And what I want to tell you, Danusha, is that 3,000 words is quite enough to capture the whole story. You are talking about 6 A4 sheets. You don't need so much. It is just a matter of getting the wording correct, making it as concise as necessary, and you have captured the causes, the components of the causes, and the responses that are required to each of the components of those causes in order to bring about a resolution that is actually creative and which will take us forward. Thank you.
Lasil, you said you want to make a comment.
Is it for me?
Yeah, you said you made a comment saying you want to make a short comment, and then we can conclude with Danushka's final planning.
All what I feel is, I think everybody understands, especially Danushka spoke of even, state capture. And also at the end, he said what about this odious debt. Actually, we have understood the big problems what we have. On that basis, I think there's no problem at all. We should be able to discuss these things at length. And my biggest problem is, unless you rectify these deficiencies, institutional issues, right, we will not be able to go forward. And only way out is to rectify all those sort of mistakes and then put the country on the right track. Because, we have to go back to the 1931 to 47 period. Actually, those were the rulers who were able to establish a system of governance in place. And that was a sort of a reformation era, and they did their job. But unfortunately, after independence, we were on the wrong track. So what we need to do is, start again from scratch. And if you really agree on those points, I think we'll be able to do it without any problem. Within a few years, we'll be able to definitely achieve growth and development. There's no problem at all. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Okay, I think, Danisha, you got 10 minutes to kind of conclude, give us a kind of plan that you'd like to follow so we can support. Danisha, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, as both Roshan and Nirmalan very rightly said, and also Mr. Lasil. So what I was going to say now, that especially since the 1950s, I think we need to address this issue of this state or state-led racism also. Now, especially after the 1950s, by how Tamil people actually suffered tremendous losses of government jobs and so on by completely overnight moving into a single-only system, and then we know the standardization policy of the left-wing governments, completely racially biased proposals that were brought into the constitution. So these things are absolutely essential. So here, of course, we are not going into the issues that have emerged out of this corrupt the corporate class and the collusion among the corporate class with the political establishment and the government bureaucracy. But it does not mean that we are not conscious and we are completely aware of this this racially biased and very supremacist view taken by the Sinhala government since the independence, and this is a tremendous issue, and it wouldn't be very easy to address it also. But of course, the Aragalaya, after 2022, it sort of moved into a type of a capitalist type of a revolution, but in a very marginal sense. The forces of racism are very much active. So it's an uphill battle. I think if we can have a separate discussion of that, it would be great also. And Ms. Nilmini is raising a question about how the energy prices can go down if we eliminate over-invoicing. I think what Gratian was saying is that now coal prices and oil imports are over-invoiced, so making their costs much more higher, which are basically paid by the government, and that higher costs are being pushed down into translates into higher energy costs. So if there is no over-invoicing, the energy costs would actually go down, because those prices will not have to, those higher artificial prices will not have to be borne out by the public. That's what I think, that's what Gratian meant and suggested. So yeah, so then I will just, since we covered quite a bit about over-invoicing, we can also have another discussion on that maybe later if that is required. I'll just move on to the other.
Danisha, we got only 10 minutes or so. So can we just conclude with a plan to take this up? Because over-invoicing and under-invoicing is a major issue, as Gratian and everybody else told, and we understand even the government is involved with it. So
yes.
If you can please write a small section for that, yeah, and address the root causes, because there was an issue with the legal framework getting involved. Try to do something about this as well. So get you all that in a small document, so that we got another small document within your very large document, which is a very comprehensive one, to address this. And when you talk about over invoicing by the government, that's a very saleable point to the general public, saying even the government is doing this over invoicing. So you'll be able to gather more people to support what you're saying. So Gratian, you raised the hand, and I really want to take it forward, Danusha. And so if you can make a small document again, we can meet up in 2 weeks or so.
Yep. Two things. One, I have put my contact details on this thing, chat box. So if I could be of any assistance, you can always call on me, and I will voluntarily and enthusiastically support. Right. So that is one thing. And this is a very important thing. This is our national thing.
Extremely appreciated.
Right. So Nirmalan mentioned a very important thing. The 6 pages of 3,000 words should articulate the whole problem. That's very important. So that means your document should be the introduction. And then each of the issues could be discussed in chapters in detail, so that we will be taking it to educate the public, policymakers, and more importantly, the IMF, World Bank, ADB, and the bilateral and multilateral development partners. So that should be the distinction, because it is a huge education, awareness, and social marketing program that is needed. And I really appreciate what Chula is doing and all the others are doing. Lasil is doing some very good work with the rule of the law. Lasil, tomorrow, if you can make it a Zoom meeting and invite all these people, that will be great as well. Then the other important thing is, on the racial issue, the national problem that we call it, it will be 40 years in July, from the Black July in 1983. So this will be forgotten until we hit July. So I appeal to all the parties to look at this particular scenario of 40 years. And now again, the drumming up is there for racial discrimination and racial disharmony. Jerome, Kalagodatte, Jnanasara, and various others are doing the circuits, all in a sort of a designed manner. So how to sort of, get that discussion from this very low level into a more meta or philosophical level that will address the problems of the nation. Thank you.
Gracian, your last point about discrimination is already, we have started trying to address that separately. That's a big issue, that is separate one. But today's focus was on this, and it has now come down to this overpricing and underpricing. Dhanusha, is it possible for you to put what we put together into a small document and circulate, and I can circulate it to everybody and then they get the comments and have another discussion in say 2 or 3 weeks, so that we can finalize that bit, so that we can take action as to what to be done, and then we make it happen. So we can do that. And even the nuclear power issue, we wrote a document, we sent it to Atomic Energy Authority and everything. So I believe it's having some impact. So we can make an impact. Don't be pessimistic, be optimistic. We can do it, but we have to sort out our understandings and differences and everything, accommodate it, and then put it together. So we can do that. I've done that before in the country, so we can do it again. So Dhanusha, anything you want to say, anything else?
Yeah, so for the moment, Chula, now I am also studying what causes particularly these outflows and or the total flows particularly from Sri Lanka, and it tends to differ from economy to economy, underdeveloped country to conditions are different, but there are general causes. Now, if we go into those theoretical things, I think those are fairly complicated. But there are general consensus, like, tax evasion, higher inflation would cause people to move that out. So I would argue that moving that capital out itself causes the inflation. So you can argue in that form also, that's a different. So, if we take the causes of these outflows, I should say in the economics discipline, there is no consensus of why this is happening. Different people are saying different things based on their studies. So I am also involved in my PhD is involved in that, how to explain capital flows through the economic structure. But what I can do is that I can summarize the existing ideas. These are what the scholars have said about this. So these are the ideas that are already there. And according to them, those are the triggers. So would that be already? Is that something that you have in mind, or if you are looking into the causes of these outflows? So
yeah,
but in my personal view, the issue is more complicated, theoretically more complicated. Why this is happening? But so I won't go into that here. But because this is like a general discussion, we have to engage with the public. There are deeper theoretical issues which wouldn't actually interest the public also. Why this is happening? But anyway, I'm connecting it with the nature of the economic structure that is determined by this what we call the criminal criminal corporate class and the colluding political elite. Ultimately, they are the ones who actually determine the structure of the economy by particular method of their surplus appropriation, the particular relationship they establish with the resources in the system, that is the labor and capital and all that, how they connect with that to make profits, what is the type of the relationship that determines the economic structure and the rest of the living standards and everything, where the economy is ultimately headed is determined by that. So but it's just an overview. We have to go into that to actually pinpoint this is why this is happening and so on. But which I think is more, I don't think we need to go into that depth here. So we can actually collate the ideas in general, what people like even ADB, IMF has also talked about this issue, and what UNCTAD is saying, UN is saying, what are the causes, and they are very much interested in stopping this. That's why it's in the Sustainable Development Goals. So maybe
Danusha, can I suggest that we'll take this one matter forward, and because we are fighting against a big elephant, right? Okay, so we need to kind of be tactful and attack slowly and slowly. The person gets weaker, or this big elite whatever conglomerate takes weaker. So to address that, shall we do this overpricing and underpricing as a very important issue that needs to be addressed? So then if you send me a kind of a very draft document with the subtitles that you want to talk about, I'll circulate it around and try to improve it a bit more with the others' comments and everything else, and then try to bring it forward again for a discussion. So we can talk the walk. Basically, if we talk the walk several times, we may be able to make an impact. That's what I'm saying.
Sure, can do. Definitely.
Yes. So, I mean, that's wonderful. I mean, today we had a wonderful discussion, and you had a resource that you can not get that easily, spending 2 hours listening to you and coming to this level. And we all are doing it to improve or recover our country. And there are major issues that needs to be addressed. So let's close today at this level. And please send me a small document, Danusha, about this overpricing and underpricing. Explain a little bit solutions and the root causes and the legal frameworks, etc., that needs to be addressed. Then I will circulate it, get it improved a bit more, and others' ideas into it, and then take it forwards. Any other way of taking it forward from the audience? Is there any way others wants to change or give me a different direction?
Because sorry, Chula, you're looking at something like 1.5 page to 2 page document.
Yeah,
something
very
like
small
that.
one, because very simple, very small one. So then people understand it. We can send it to papers. We can send it to IMF. That's kind of thing, so that we make a social impact on one issue. Saying overpricing of oil or whatever will make a big impact. That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other thing? Any other suggestions from the audience? Because I think it's a very important discussion today. We did it very well. Danusha, thank you for bringing all these things, ideas in, which are very high professional level. But let's bring it down. And yes, Gretchen, you can conclude.
Thank you, Danusha. If you can, I mean, other than what you have done is basically outline. So as Nirmalan said, I mean, it should be a very concise introduction to a broader document. And this sort of thing, you are studying, you are with a certain number of people who are all, I presume that they are all voluntarily working. So we are there to help. We are there to bring in the facts. And I think, I mean, Chula's motto is fact-based. If we say something, we have to say it with facts. And also we might have to quantify a few things so that the people can understand. And those quantities of money or whatever the other resources, we'll have to contrast with various other things. So there is a lot of things that can be done, and everybody is eager. You, as Chula mentioned, don't be pessimistic on many things, that you are alone. No, you are not alone. There are others in this domain who are eager to collaborate and participate and get the things right. We wish you well. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. I think we had a very good discussion
So
today
much.
and contributions from everyone. So Danushka, we expect to meet you again to discuss at least this one point and make an implementation of what you want to do as far as possible, and then take it up the other issues that you wanted to discuss as well. So thank you very much for everybody. Can I conclude unless anybody else want to make any comment at the moment? Because it's taken over 2 hours now. All right. Okay. Thank you so much. Danusha, well done. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chula. Thank you, Danusha.